This is the penultimate study in our Bible study, chapter 23 from the Gospel of Luke. It's going to be an interesting one, so let's just jump into it. It's possible Kelly and Rob could join us.
Yeah.
But for right now, it's just Jordan and I. And Jordan, if you go to before the chapter here. So I've become quite friendly with Elon Musk's Grok. And something that I've pondered throughout our study when looking at the different eschatological frameworks, I've been like, where do I shake out on this? I don't really consider myself to, I of all the different views, whether it was like preterism or premillennialism or something like that, I didn't really say like, oh yeah, that's me, because I think as I've let it be known throughout here, the view that I'm sort of inclined towards is that the second coming was imminent. It happened. That in some sense we can talk about the millennial reign already occurring, and I think we're way further along in the Bible, in the short season of Revelation 20, just before the Gog-Magog war. Now, that's not something I would say, oh, that's 100% right. Take that to the bank. This is just where I am in my own journey.
Yeah.
But I haven't been able to give it a label. And so I asked Grok to perhaps tell me what view I have. And it's like, Grok said, essentially, he's like, there isn't an already established label for what you are. But here are two choices. One was historical realized millennialism or preterist postmillennial hybrid. So I think I kind of gravitate towards this historical realized millennialism because I think implicit in the definition, you can pause. We have a lot to cover here. If you want to pause this video and read out what exactly that entails, the millennial reign is taken more literally, whereas the preterist postmillennial hybrid that Grok came up with could also be understood to be symbolic. And I don't think there's a reason to think of it being symbolic. I think there's a reason to think about it being literal. So I thought that was interesting. I think as of right now in 2025, I'm a historical realized millennialist. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I thought it was fun and interesting to try to put labels that sort of correlate with existing traditions. So that was fun. But as always, when you are seeking truth, sometimes you kind of bust out of these categories, but they can certainly be helpful shorthand or help like find other information. That's related.
Cool. Okay, so let's get into it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So chapter 23. And the whole multitude of them arose and led him unto Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, we found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ, a king. So what's going on here is that we have some mixture of the Jewish populace that's like, we got to do something about this Christ. We have to invent some charges or drum up some charges so that the Romans will kill him, will condemn and kill him by state mechanism.
Right.
And what do you notice about these charges? We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ the king. Do those charges ring true? Did Christ forbid tribute to Caesar?
No, it was quite the opposite.
Exactly. So it's
in previous chapters.
Right. It's a false accusation, right?
He was very careful about that.
Right. This idea of Christ as king, they're trying to twist his words and saying, oh, he's setting himself up as a political figure that is, and ultimately this is going to be a charge of sedition. Did Christ set himself up as a political figure?
No.
If Christ is
quite
king,
the opposite.
right? If Christ is king in any sense, it's only in a spiritual sense, right? And so really, you only have, and whatever this perverting the nation means, that's a whole can of worms. But I mean, to look up this whole, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, you go back to Luke 20:19 through 26, you can see that that's just demonstrably false, right? And as far as Christ never wanting to be a temporal king, go check out Luke 19:29 through 40 for your answer on that.
Coming with receipts.
Yep, exactly.
And in 2025,
yeah,
this is a relevant phrase.
I'm not going to get into it, but you're not, right? You're not allowed to say Christ is king now, right? If you do, you're a very bad person. Okay. All right. So, let's see here. Verse 3. And Pilate asked him, saying, Art thou the king of the Jews? And he answered him and said, Thou sayest it. Okay. So, I think, like I said earlier, like he in a way, yes, and in a way, no. By the way that you're acting, you're kind of acknowledging that in a spiritual sense I am, but no way do I make any sort of claim as a political king.
Right.
Then said Pilate to the chief priests and to the people, I find no fault in this man. So Pilate, he's clearly doesn't see that there's something treasonous or seditious about being Christ existing or Christ having followers. He's not perceiving some threat to the Roman state. And they were the more fierce, saying, He stirreth up the people, teaching throughout all Jewry, beginning from Galilee to this place. When Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked whether the man were a Galilean. So we're getting into a jurisdiction issue. And as soon as he knew that he belonged unto Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself also was at Jerusalem at that time. And when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceeding glad, for he was desirous to see him of a long season, because he had heard many things of him, and he hoped to have seen some miracle done by him. So something that comes up here in the literature that I found is that, Herod had a lot of guilt. He was responsible. Ultimately, he succumbed and ordered the execution of John the Baptist, right? And he felt a lot of guilt about that. And from what he had heard about Jesus, he was somewhat concerned or maybe relieved that Jesus was somehow a reincarnation or a resurrection of John the Baptist. Like, maybe like I get a do-over on this. Okay. Then he questioned with him in many words, but he answered him nothing. So Christ goes before Herod and is like, doesn't speak. And there's a lot of theme. There's a lot of reasons why that may have happened. Like, the contempt, maybe he had contempt towards him for killing his cousin, John the Baptist, or perhaps he was fulfilling a prophecy, which is Isaiah 53:7, which says, of the suffering servant, he was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shears is silent, so he did not open his mouth. So he might have been fulfilling that, which gets into an interesting question about what it means to fulfill prophecy. If you're leaning into it or not. I don't know. There also, he may have been like not wanting to acknowledge his authority and give him any sort of account. Stop me if you want to throw something in here.
No, I think that's good. I just am reminded of like earlier chapters where Jesus is very strategic about what he does and does not say.
Yeah. Couple steps ahead.
Oh.
Why only a couple? Why not infinity? Maybe he is. This gets into Trinity issues. And the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. And Herod, with his men of war, set him at naught and mocked him and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe and sent him again to Pilate. So in general, set him at naught means to treat him with contempt. And the same day, Pilate and Herod were made friends together, for before they were at enmity between themselves. There's some backstory here where they had some sort of squabble, but ultimately, because they were forced into a situation where both of them were, forced to decide the fate of a man that they believed to be innocent, in a way, it kind of drove the pagan heathen Pilate and the Jewish Herod into being friends, being like, we've got this weird, you and I've been in this situation where this man who says he's the son of God has come before us, and we are somehow part of his saga. Is that the reason why they became friends afterwards? I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe that's one of the reasons. Like, we've been through something similar. And Pilate, when he called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people, said unto them, Ye have brought this man unto me as one that perverteth the people. And behold, I, having examined him before you, have found no fault in this man touching those things whereof ye accuse him.
Mm-hmm.
No, nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. I will therefore chastise him and release him. Some sources that I consulted on this, the chastising actually meant like a kind of a light beating or a flogging, and just to kind of mess him up enough so that he wouldn't get himself in trouble, so that he would waste court resources for this hubbub.
Mm-hmm.
Even if he was innocent. He's like, hey, maybe you want to go about doing your business a little bit differently. Maybe you want to get out of town. But like, seriously, I don't want to be put in this situation again where I have to condemn an innocent man. For of necessity, he must release one unto them at the feast. This was kind of interesting. I'm going to quote something here from the pulpit commentary. I was like, where does this come from? Like, wait, is this in the Bible somewhere? No, it's not. From the pulpit commentary, as a Hebrew custom, it is never mentioned save in this place. Such a release was a common incident of a Latin lectirsnium, or feast in honor of the gods. The Greeks had a similar custom at the Thesmophoria. It was probably introduced at Jerusalem by the Roman power. So this is a pagan practice from the Greeks that got passed on to the Romans, where during this feast, you let somebody go. And they let a terrible guy go, this guy named Barabbas, which we're going to learn about. And they cried out all at once, saying, Away with this man, and release unto us Barabbas, who for a certain sedition made in the city and for murder was cast into prison. He actually did these things. So they want they want to release the guy that did the very thing that they're accusing Jesus of. Pilate, sedition, that is. Pilate, therefore, willing to release Jesus, spake again to them, but they cried, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. And he said unto them the third time. So we have our our magical number of 3, this completion of the cycle. Why, what evil hath he done? I have found no cause of death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go. And they were instant with loud voices, requiring that he might be crucified. And the voices of them and the chief priests prevailed. And Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required. And we see here that, and I've already alluded to it earlier in our discussion, that Jesus is fulfilling a number of prophecies from Isaiah, specifically Isaiah 53. So we have another one here, Isaiah 53:12, which reads, Therefore will I divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he hath poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors, and he bare the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors. That was one of the, I had never read Isaiah before. And when I read it for the first time and I got to chapter 53, I was like, this is Christ. Like, this is Christ. Like, and so it's very intriguing to me. Like, you could maybe argue that he was trying to substitute and fulfill this role and leaned into it. But I think that would require too much power for an ordinary man. Mm-hmm. So I have questions about how you could read the Old Testament and come across these passages and be like, I don't know if that's Jesus, Yeah. So, okay. And he released unto them him that for sedition and murder was cast into prison, whom they had desired, but he delivered Jesus to their will. And as they led him away, they laid hold upon one, Simon, a Cyrenian, coming out of the country, and on him they laid the cross that he might bear it after Jesus. I don't know if there's some great story with Simon, but I think the idea is that he came from Libya. I'm sure one could write a whole book about who he was, but nothing about it really jumped out at me. And like, oh, okay. Cyrenian of Cyrene in Libya on the north coast of Africa, where were many Jews who had a synagogue at Jerusalem. So, yeah. So, I mean, look, it's not, we're talking, it's, this is a Jew that's trying to help Jesus out, so it's not black and white about what the Jewish reception was of Jesus. In this in Christ's moment of need, we have this Simon the Cyrenian who's trying to take a load off of him. And there followed him a great company of people and of women, which also bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus, turning it unto them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming in which they shall say, Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bear and the paps which never gave suck. Going into what I started off this discussion with, the what are we calling my view? I forget.
The historical
realized millennialism.
Yes.
That would, I think, the essence of what he's saying. For behold, the days are coming in which they shall say. That seems to, again, I'd put that in like the second coming is nigh. Unless you want to say like it got delayed somehow. I don't know. I'm not like the world's some great Bible scholar, but it seems like Jesus was like, no, it's just around the corner. Yeah. Historically realized millennialism. All right. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in the dry? So this is like a maxim or a proverb, a Hebrew one. The green tree meaning like a young or innocent plant.
Right.
Christ being innocent here. So for those of us who are actually guilty, like myself, what's going to be done to us when the dry, the fire burns things up when it's dry? There's going to be a harsher judgment, right? And there were also two other malefactors led with him to be put to death. This is again a fulfillment. This is Isaiah 53:9 fulfilled, which reads, and he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. Now, things are going to get a little crazy here, if they haven't gotten crazy already.
Yeah.
And when they were come to the place, which is called Calvary, there they crucified him and the malefactors, one on the right hand and the other on the left. There's so much symbolism in this. You could spill a lot of ink on it, but Calvary in Latin is Calvaria, I guess that's how you say it, which means skull.
Okay.
But in Aramaic, this place was called Golgotha. So Christ gets crucified on the skull. Like that seems to be highly symbolic and highly meaningful. Maybe you could talk about the idea of God, the paradox of a dying God on a cross is somehow like a crucifixion of one's reason as well, and which makes room for faith in like a Kierkegaardian kind of fashion. But one of the things I found, if you scroll down to this article, I found this actually this morning, which was when I was reviewing my notes. The early church father, Origen, actually, it wasn't just any skull that was this crucifixion spot for Jesus, that there was a Jewish tradition that this was the place where Adam's skull and body.
Oh.
So then you have this idea that the first man who succumbed to sin and essentially caused the noetic effects of sin to interpenetrate all of creation so that it would fall, right? Okay, is going to have that action negated because the second Adam, which Christ is often referred to as, is going to die and resurrect at the vaguely in this. He's at least going to die there. He's going to resurrect at the tomb that Joseph of Arimathea buries him in. But in a way, you see this full circle moment.
Yeah.
If I don't know if this is true, but I had no idea. And here's a paper that one can dig into this tradition, Golgotha and the Burial of Adam Between Jewish and Christian Tradition by Jordan J. Ryan. I skimmed it. It looks very interesting. I'm just telling you out there, but Origen was the one who really promulgated this early. I'm trying to figure. I've got notes here. He did it. Origen did it in a commentary on Matthew, I believe. I have my notes here. It doesn't matter. But anyway, just go look it up, okay?
Yeah. Homework.
It does matter, but I can't find it right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I talking too much? Do you want to weigh in on anything?
I mean, this will probably be relevant again later, but I'm just very struck within this chapter about like the role of government and democracy. Perhaps, I mean, it's not like necessarily the exact system of democracy, but we're talking about a crowd,
the mob,
mob rule. Also, maybe it's not inevitable. Like this one chapter is maybe perhaps insufficient to conclude that, but it feels inevitable to me that systems of government are going to be open to influence by negative spiritual forces. You know, earlier in Luke, Jesus is telling us to give Caesar what is Caesar's, but it's not this full endorsement of Caesar. No. It's strategic.
Right.
It's a strategic statement, whether he means it literally or if he's saying it just to be compliant in the public square is not totally clear to me. I think it's most likely the first, but.
And it's not the first time that we saw, Jesus, he doesn't condemn the centurions earlier on and the tax collectors.
Right.
He's like, if you were in those roles, to perform them justly. He's not, don't try to subvert the state when you're in these positions of power. He doesn't do any of that.
That's different than saying the state is necessarily a positive influence.
No. Yeah. Well, that gets into an interesting question about why do states exist? And, we talk about government. I think this gets a long conversation about where does government come from? Where do states come from? Where do kings come from? I forget where it is in the Old Testament, but the Israelites actually demanded that they have a king. That's right. And God was like, are you okay? If that's what you want, you're gonna have to learn the hard way. Guess what happens?
Yeah.
So
the political science dork in me is very interested in this theme, this pattern.
Yep.
And it's not hard to see how it's playing out right now.
Yep.
And the people stood beholding, and the rulers also with them derided him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself, if he be Christ, the chosen of God.
Okay, this got pretty crazy too. Something that I discovered, I had forgotten this, but in Deuteronomy, in Deuteronomy 21:23, this is the NIV version. It reads, you must not leave the body hanging on the pole overnight. Be sure to bury it that same day, because anyone who is hung on a pole is under God's curse. You must not desecrate the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. So in this Jewish tradition, being crucified, hung on a tree, put on a pole, however you want to talk about it, was seen because of this passage in Deuteronomy as that you were a cursed individual. And that not taking you down quickly or whatever was actually going to curse the entire land. So, and the people of that time would have known that somehow that this was like an indictment of Christ, that perhaps he wasn't who he said he was, and that he was cursed. Now, my first thought was, okay, this is one of those moments when you're reading, you go, okay, this is when like the Gnostic perspective becomes handy because you're like, oh, of course, like the demiurge would say that the messenger of the transcendent good God would be cursed if he's on a pole or whatever. So of course that would happen there. But if in order to maintain the harmony of the Old Testament and the New Testament, what some have said about this is, yeah, Jesus was cursed in a way, cursed with having to take on the sin of all humanity in this moment. So it's like, yeah, he took it. I don't want to say cursed, but he negated somehow the curse that was on humanity as the result of the fall. And that's how people have reconciled this. Otherwise, that is a tough one. That's a tough one.
I don't have an answer to that, but wants to point out this is an example of contagious magic. To link it to other studies.
To the golden bough stuff.
Yeah, this idea that another person would be cursed, and if we don't,
and their blood touches the ground,
right.
And so they're cursed, and it's gonna seep into the ground, and then the ground is gonna be cursed. Yeah, contagious magic. Got it. Good call. And the soldiers also mocked him, coming to him and offering him vinegar, and saying, "If thou be the king of the Jews, save thyself." And a superscription also was written over him in letters of Greek and Latin and Hebrew. I actually kind of love this in the Bible. Like occasionally it types in all caps, which is like me when I'm like schizo posting on I'm like when I'm typing in all caps. It's nice to know that there were,
This has a tradition.
This has a tradition. Yeah. This is the king of the Jews. And one of the malefactors, which were hanged, railed on him, saying, "If thou be Christ, save thyself and us." But the other answering rebuked him, saying, "Dost not thou fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man hath done nothing amiss." And he said unto Jesus, "Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom." This is pretty. Think about this. You're dying on this cross. And you can kind of understand why the one, I guess they're both thieves. Why the one thief is like, "Oh yeah, right. If you're really God, you'd save us." And the other's like, "Shut your mouth." So the tension's very interesting. And Jesus said unto him, "Verily, I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise." So can we go to our Larkin?
Let's do it.
Diagram here.
Yeah.
I've brought these up throughout the study. You see the three crosses here in the center, and you can see the penitent thief is going to go down into paradise. And I think this is a case against the doctrine of soul sleep.
Yeah.
Because he's like immediately in paradise. There's not like some sort of intermediate place where he's at. He goes straight to paradise. And the impenitent thief, he goes straight to hell. But it's not like this whole underworld and overworld thing that we've been looking at is much more complex than anyone talks about. There's lots of, and you're not in that particular place forever. Like you can go, you go to paradise, then you can go up to heaven. And if you're in hell, you go to the great throne judgment, and you probably will end up in the lake of fire, which is not hell, which is a great conflation that happens in a lot of biblical discussion. So there's a lot of movement here. There's a lot of subway stops. Okay. Good?
Yes.
Questions?
No, because we've talked about this before.
Yeah, we've gone through it. But in case someone was watching this for the first time.
Yes, there's a lot here. You can go find all of these charts online.
Yeah. And why? Yeah, go start the study from the beginning.
Larkin.
Yeah, Larkin.
Yeah, Larkin.
Yeah, Clarence Larkin.
Crazy stuff.
He did these in the early 1900s.
Yeah,
this one specifically was done on January 26, 1919.
I always enjoy the pictures in the bottomless pit.
Yep.
And the lake of fire.
Yep. I should have I should have put the other one in there with the heavens.
Oh yeah, but this one's good because we have
Yep.
the two thieves.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And if for those who don't know, Christ then goes into paradise and breaks the Old Testament saints and the righteous dead out of there.
That's right.
So they're
Breaks them out of jail.
That's right. And we early on we considered that John the Baptist was down
Might be
in paradise, preparing everyone for Christ descending down there. That's pretty crazy.
It is pretty crazy.
All right. And it was about the 6th hour, and there was a darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour. So the 6th hour would have been about noon. Okay. And some people say that this darkness over all the earth was an eclipse or a storm. Don't really know. And the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent in the midst. I guess this, again, we have the eclipse here. The sun was darkened. But what was so interesting to me, I've known about ever since I was a little boy, I've known about the veil of the temple was rent in the midst. And I was like, it was deeply meaningful. Like, for God to like tear the veil in the temple. Like what, I don't know what I thought that meant. And maybe that refers also to like pierce the veil, or maybe there's but something that I came across here. So think about it. You haven't done a close study of like the Old Testament, right? But they have like in their temples and in their arks and stuff like that, they actually think that God is there, like in those spaces. And what do we know that's going to happen to the second temple, or the Herod's temple in 70? What's going to happen?
It'll be torn up.
It's going to be destroyed, right?
Yeah.
See,
leveled.
It's going to be leveled. No brick will be on top of brick, which raises interesting questions. And we explored
about some walls
and a controversial idea that is called temple denialism. But the veil being rent, would God allow his home to be destroyed if he was in it? No. I think the idea here is that when the veil is torn, I think the way that this is interpreted is that that's when God left the temple. And then it's destroyed in 70 AD. That's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
That's pretty heavy. I'm not saying that's the right interpretation. I got that from the Cambridge Bible for Schools and Colleges commentary. The veil of the temple was rent in the midst. The veil intended must be what was called the parasheth, or inner veil, which hung between the holy place and the Holy of Holies. It was very heavy and splendid with embroidery. It is alluded to in Hebrews 6:19, Hebrews 9:3, Hebrews 10:19 through 20. The obvious significance of the portent was the departure of the Shekinah, or presence of God, from his now deserted temple. I mean, I mean the imagery.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just a metaphor, but that I saw this differently when I read that.
Yeah.
Okay. And when Jesus had cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. Now, when the centurion saw what was done, he glorified God, saying, certainly this was a righteous man. And all the people that came together to that sight, beholding the things which were done, smote their breasts and returned. And all his acquaintance and the women that followed him from Galilee stood afar off, beholding these things. And behold, there was a man named Joseph, a counselor, and he was a good man and a just. The same had not consented to the counsel indeed of them. He was of Arimathea, a city of the Jews, who also himself waited for the kingdom of God. This man went unto Pilate and begged the body of Jesus.
And he took it down and wrapped it in linen and laid it in a sepulchre that was hewn in stone, wherein never man before was laid. So again, we have a fulfillment of prophecy, 53:9 of Isaiah, and he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. So he's a rich man has taken care of him because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And that day was the preparation, and the Sabbath drew on. So what this means is that Joseph probably took the body down, probably within 3 hours, about 6 o'clock. Okay. On Good Friday.
Mm-hmm.
We cool?
Yeah.
I can finish it up if it's signed out. Okay. And the women also, which came with him from Galilee, followed after and beheld the sepulchre and how his body was laid. And they weren't really too crazy about how Joseph had done that. So they returned and prepared spices and ointments and rested the Sabbath day according to the commandment. Yeah, go down a little bit. There you are. So what I thought was super interesting about this is that it says that the Sabbath day is Saturday, right? If he dies on Good Friday, then the Sabbath day is Saturday, and then Jesus is going to resurrect the next day on Sunday, right there at the very end. Yeah. Okay. So this passage in the New Testament is acknowledging Saturday as a Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when do Christians go to church?
Sunday.
Well, for a long time, I was like, that's wrong. That's some sort of hijacking, right? Like clearly, like in this upside down world, the Sabbath has been moved to the wrong day.
Yeah.
What I think may have happened here, digging a little bit more into it, is that because Christ resurrected on the first day of the week on Sunday, in time Christians came to celebrate that as the day of their worship because that's when the hopeful event occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not like this big like Illuminati like conspiracy or something like that. It kind of makes sense. Like, yeah, maybe we should praise God on the day that he rose from the dead, which was a Sunday. Mm-hmm. I can kind of get behind that. But then we have this issue where we're told in the Old Testament to keep the Sabbath and make it holy or whatever, right? And maybe you can do both. Maybe you should just be celebrating them both. You should be having all day Saturday, all day Sunday. Even to this day, there are some Christian denominations who still celebrate or still worship on Saturdays. So, what's going on here? I think I'm a little bit more sympathetic now to the idea of church services being on Sunday. I can understand why. But this whole Sabbath keeping thing, I got to dig a little bit more into.
Or you can just use your Gnostic cheat code.
Well, there are other problems that come along with the Gnostic cheat code.
It's not so simple.
Yeah.
But
it offers a way out on some things, but it certainly
it
makes a whole bunch of other problems.
Yeah.
So
I know.
All right. So that's all that I prepared.
Awesome.
I did almost all the talking, but
you did today.
I think the flow was good.
Yeah.
Do you want to discuss anything?
Really, I touched on the things that I wanted to. I'm sure that we could go deeper into the imagery in this chapter. There's a lot of really cool imagery that we could spiral about for a long, long time.
Be crucified on a skull. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And then I was thinking about Hamlet and is that... Yep. Anyway, there's just so many other downstream of the Bible.
I think Dali did a Golgotha painting.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Did he? Oh, this is the Corpus Hypercubus.
I could pull up here if you want. But
yeah, keep going, keep talking.
Yeah, I was very intrigued by Pilate's desire to not crucify Jesus. But the people demanded. They'd rather let a murderer go than someone who could be disruptive of their philosophical, political point of view.
Yeah, they're so not just philosophical, it's their religious point of view.
Sure. Yeah. But I think more than that, it's what are the underlying beliefs required to perpetuate a particular form of power?
Mm-hmm.
What is needed to maintain that power?
Yep.
And these feel very relevant, very, very relevant to today.
Yep.
Maybe always and forever, but
time is a flat circle or something.
Something like that.
All right.
Well, thanks, Luke.
No problem. One more study.
That's right.
All right. Peace out.